Hey guys, it's Tori, and today I'm going to be doing my August wrap-up. So, as you know, I was doing the N.E.W.T.s readathon as well as the Classicsathon during the month of August. I have posted my vlog by this point, so I will link that down below in case you're interested in my first thoughts after completing each of the books. But today I wanted to briefly go over each of the books I read. I was successfully able to accomplish my career, which was a librarian. That was really awesome. So the first book I read was My Name Is Asher Lev by Chaim Potok. This was for the challenge for an A in Ancient Runes, which was to read a book recommended by a friend. This was recommended to me by my dad, and it essentially follows a Jewish boy who is a artist prodigy, but he grows up in a community where he's a little bit looked down upon because of his love of art. So it basically just follows him from the time when he was a child up through until he kind of becomes more ostracized from his community, and basically talks about how he got to that point. It focuses a lot on his relationship with his parents, which is very interesting, and I ended up giving it 4 out of 5 stars. I really found Asher Lev to be a very fascinating character. I thought he was the one narrating it. It was like he was reflecting on what brought him to the point he's at now as an adult. And you could tell that he was very reserved, but he felt things very deeply. He just wasn't willing to share all of his feelings. And you could tell that when he did share his feelings, it was really deep that he felt it, because he wasn't super good at sharing his feelings normally. And it was interesting to see his parents' reactions, the community's reactions to him sharing his feelings. It's definitely a very character-driven book, and honestly, the plot itself is kind of boring in some ways. It's not super action-focused at all, not even really drama-focused. It's mostly just on his development as a person and as an artist. It was more a book that is enjoyable once you take time to think about it, what it's trying to say, what he's trying to say, why he's sharing what he's choosing to share. So I could see a lot of people finding it boring, but again, I really enjoyed it. And I definitely recommend it if you're interested in those kinds of character-driven, character-focused stories. The next book I read was for an A in History of Magic, and for that I had to read a fantasy, so I ended up choosing A Torch Against the Night by Sabaa Tahir. This book is the second book in the Ember and the Ashes series. This series basically follows this world in which there are kind of the leading class is called the martial class, and they are fighters, and the most praiseworthy of that class are the masks, who are highly trained fighters. So we end up following this girl who is a scholar, one of the lowest classes, and her brother ends up being taken prisoner and her grandparents are killed by these masks, and so she goes in search of help to free her brother from the resistance which has been organized, and in order to have them free her brother, they bargain with her to go in as a spy into the academy where they train masks to the commandant, who's very brutal. And then we also follow Elias, who is being trained as a mask. He's very skilled at being a mask, but his mother is the commandant, and he ends up being put into a trials thing. Sorry if you can hear voices behind me, my roommates are out and about as well, so sorry about that. But anyway, these trials to see who will become the next emperor. And we also follow Hale a little bit throughout the series, who is Elias's friend and another mask. And it's a very interesting concept. I really enjoyed the first one, but the second one I ended up not loving as much. I think I still gave it 4 out of 5 stars because for what it was very good, and a lot of my lack of enjoyment of it is because my reading tastes have changed so much, I feel like. But also I feel like the first half of the book ended up going in a really generic direction that I was a little disappointed in. I also despise the love story in this series. I didn't like it in the first one either, but the first one it wasn't focused on quite as much as it was in this one. It was just a lot of the romantic moments were very repetitive and cheesy and angsty, which I am very picky about angsty romances. Like, I enjoy some of them, but a lot of them, especially as my reading tastes have changed, I don't love them quite as much as I used to. So anyway, I also found the politics to be very, like, the political decisions made by politicians in the story to be very ridiculous and unnecessary. And yeah, so basically that's my feelings towards it. The second half ended up being a lot better, and I think I may continue with the series, probably just listening to it on Audible. I mean, it was fine. Again, the second half, it went in a direction that I really enjoyed, but I don't know. I might try one more book and see if it's something I do really want to continue with, or if I end up just being like, meh, but we'll see how it goes. The next book I ended up finishing was for the challenge for Ancient Runes, and for that I had to read a book written in past tense, and I ended up choosing The Tenant of Wildfell by Brontë. This was the crowning jewel of my reading month for sure. I gave it 5 out of 5 stars. Absolutely loved it. It's been a while since I read a Brontë novel. I've only ever read Wuthering Heights and Jane Eyre, so I was looking forward to trying an Anne Brontë novel, and like I said, I really enjoyed it. I loved Helen Graham as a character. I loved her integrity. She just had a strength that I really look up to, and a strength that I feel like connects more to who I am as a person. I feel like commonly we read about these women who are super pushy, arrogant almost, and good at fighting and things like that, which isn't bad, but for me, I'm not able to connect to that as well. Helen had this inner strength that I just adored. The synopsis, before I continue with my thoughts, the synopsis is basically that there's this woman who moves into this small town, country town, and it's just her and her son, and nobody really knows anything about her past. There's some rumors that go around about her, but it's all just guesses really and judgments. And there's this man named Gilbert Markham who gets to know her and becomes pretty good friends with her, and then, you know, wants to become something more, and he constantly is defending her against this gossip and everything, but eventually she ends up giving him her journal explaining her past and where she's come from and why she's there. I don't want to tell any more than that because of spoilers. I know you could probably find those spoilers anywhere, but I actually filmed a review a couple weeks ago, but I accidentally deleted the footage. So I may redo that, but at this point, I don't know. I'm doing my wrap up now, so it seems a little silly to do it again, but we'll see if I end up wanting to talk more about it. But yes, I highly recommend this book. It is such, I feel like the characters are so interesting to think about, their dynamics and their relationships. The story itself is very focused on internal struggles and internal battles, as well as battles within relationships, and I really like stories like that. So again, absolutely loved it. Highly recommend if you haven't read any Anne Brontë. I know she only has this one and Agnes Grey, I'm pretty sure, but this one was really, really good, and I'm excited to reread it in the future. The next book I read was for an A in Defense Against the Dark Arts, which was to read a book which was black under the dust jacket. This one I cheated a little bit because I chose a paperback that's black on the spine, and that was The Joy Luck Club by Amy Tan. I ended up giving this book 4 out of 5 stars. Really enjoyed this. This one had a similar feel to My Name Is Asher Lev, so it was very character driven. It was basically focused on these ladies who create this club in which they come together. They're immigrant Chinese women who come together and discuss life and things like that while playing mahjong, and it's just a nice little place for them to feel at home again, especially when they're in a new country, in a new culture. So this story, basically, it has multiple parts. The first part follows the women themselves, these Chinese immigrant women, and they just basically each have a chapter where they tell a little bit about their past. However, one of the women has passed away, so it focuses on her daughter, who's telling about her mom. And then there's a couple parts in the middle that go through their daughters. So each daughter kind of has a moment to talk about, or a couple moments to talk about their lives and their relationship with their mothers. Then the last part goes back to the mothers as well as the one daughter whose mother has passed away. And so it's not a linear story, it's just kind of a bunch of snippets of memory from each person, and you just are able to see how the loss of culture, the loss of tradition occurs. You're able to get a feel for how culture has influenced each of these women and how their family has influenced them. It was a really beautiful story. Like, I absolutely loved it. It was really fun to be immersed in Chinese culture. I don't know a ton about Chinese culture, and so it was really cool to delve right into it and throughout the story. And again, I feel like similar to Asher Lev, this one is a little, you could call it boring, as it is very character focused and it takes more thought to really get a lot out of it, but I feel like this was a little more exciting than My Name Is Asher Lev, and it also had more of a tone of hope than My Name Is Asher Lev did, which honestly I like them both the same, but those are kind of some differences within the storytelling, even though they're very similar in genre. Next, I picked up Dangerous by Shannon Hale. This was for the challenge for N.O., the highest grade in Ancient Runes. And for that challenge, I had to read a book that's been on my TBR forever. And so I chose this one because it has been there forever, and I just wanted to add a different genre as well to what I had been reading, as this is a science fiction. And this one follows a girl who wins this reward to be able to go to this space camp, and she ends up discovering this conspiracy that could destroy the world, and she has to figure out a way to stop it. I really, really enjoyed this. I gave it 3 out of 5 stars. Mostly because the pacing was awful. It should have been a duology. There was so much that needed to be fleshed out. I felt like I was just being dragged along by a jet, taken through the story, and barely knew what was happening, especially the first half. However, the story itself was very unique, very fun. It was such a cool story and such a cool premise and idea to the science fiction-y aspects that I'd never seen before. Not that I've read that much science fiction, but it was unique to me. Again, the pacing was so bad, and that's why it had to be a 3 stars. It couldn't even be a 4 because the pacing really drove me crazy, and it made it really hard for me to continue, especially in the first half. The second half, again, got a lot better, but there was just so much I wish had been fleshed out, so much more. Some characters I wish I had gotten to know more, so I cared a little bit more when bad things happened to them, if that makes sense. That's all I'm going to say about this. I would recommend it if you've read Shannon Hale and you like her, and you want to give all of her books a try. Go ahead, this is still a good one. I would not suggest starting here with Shannon Hale. I would suggest definitely starting with more like The Goose Girl or Princess Academy are probably the best places to start if you're interested in reading any of her stuff. This is definitely not her best work, but her ability to come up with amazing stories is definitely showcased here. Next, the 6th book I read for the month was The Storied Life of A.J. Vickery by Gabrielle Zevin. This I ended up giving 5 out of 5 stars. It was just so cute. It basically follows this man who has lost his wife. It's been a couple years, and he's basically becoming a drunk. His business isn't doing well. He owns a bookstore, and then one day he ends up having his prized possession, a collection of Edgar Allan Poe stories, stolen. And then not long after, he ends up receiving a mysterious package. I don't know if package is the best word, but a mysterious gift in his bookstore, and it just sends his life in a whole new direction. Really, this book is just about family and about life and about finding joy even though bad things happen. It's definitely one of those books that if you're a reader, like, it helps you fall in love with reading all over again and just gives you those whimsical feelings of just loving books and everything, but also it's just a beautiful story. And the audiobook, I listened to the audiobook, and the narrator had a voice that was what I would imagine A.J. Vickery to sound like, which was perfect. I definitely recommend it if you love, like, books about books. Like, this is a great one for that. And the last book I read for the N.E.W.T.s was for N.E. in A History of Magic, which was to read a book with a map in it, and I ended up picking up Under the Greenwood Tree by Thomas Hardy. This I ended up giving 3 out of 5 stars as well. I still love Hardy's writing style. I love the way he describes things, the way he characterizes people. I feel like is so amazing. Sorry about the lines right there. That's from my window. I think for this one, the reason why it's not one of my favorites of Hardy's works. Well, first of all, let me tell you what this is about before I go into all of that. This follows a small town, and there's this boy named Dick who ends up falling in love with this lady, Fancy Day, who is the new schoolmistress. And he has some competition between multiple other men who are interested in Fancy. And yeah, basically that's it. It's a very short work, and I think that's part of what was the problem with it. I felt like it was honestly pretty boring for Hardy. I did not really love the characters in this. I felt like Dick was very kind of possessive and a little bit obsessive as well in pursuing Fancy, and then I felt like Fancy was a little bit selfish and full of herself. I do appreciate that she recognized her weaknesses and tried to change them. She was just a little bit annoying, and Dick was a little bit annoying as well. One thing I did really like about the story was the contrast between this new couple who's just fallen in love, just about to get married, and his parents who are older. They've been married a long time. It gives a few moments to focus in on these older couples, so both Dick's parents as well as their family friends, and just their love and respect as they've grown older together and everything, and how that's changed and developed and progressed. There's like a moment where Dick talks about how it was sad that his parents didn't seem to have as much romance in their relationship as they probably used to, and he's like, oh, I will always treat Fancy with that same romance. It just made me think his parents, though, despite not having that physical romance quite as much, you can tell they're still friends and that they still work well together. They make an effort to work together. They have little irritations with each other and things, but they almost have a deeper, more long-lasting love after spending so many years together, and just seeing almost like Fancy and Dick's future, possibly. It was definitely one of Hardy's weaker novels. I would say if you want to read this, just go into it knowing it's very lighthearted. There's not nearly as much drama as there is in his other works. There is some drama, but it's definitely a lot more tame. So that is it. Technically, I will mention really quick, I did listen to and complete the audiobook for The Prisoner of Azkaban. I'm not going to talk about that because I've already reread that this year and talked a little more in depth about it. We'll just end this here. This ended up being a lot longer than I hoped it would be, but that's okay. We'll just try to cut out a ton of my little pauses and stuff, and hopefully that will cut it down to closer to 15 minutes, but we'll see. Anyway, I will talk to you later. Have a good week, and thank you so much for watching again. Bye!